Hey, everybody, it's Dr. Lisa. Welcome to Happy Hour with Dr. Lisa. I am your host, and I'm so glad you joined me. I am actually live streaming on Facebook. I am also live streaming on Instagram. On Instagram, you have to go to the page that relates to my blog, which is at Kids Can See Ghosts Can You. So if you want to put a if you want to put a face to this voice, you are welcome to do so. Join me on Instagram or Facebook. And if you have questions, always make sure that you contact me. I'm so easy to find. You can find me on Instagram. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on Facebook. You can find me almost anywhere. Quora, Twitter. I can't even think of the other social media pages, but if you Google me, if you can't find me, please use social media. You can also reach me at my Gmail email address. It's kidscanseeghosts@gmail.com. If you actually want to send me a voice message, you can do that too. My number is 765-205-1959. All righty. Last week, let's see, for the past 2 weeks, we have been discussing Child A. If you are not familiar with Child A, I want you to go to the blog because once I start talking about these kids, know that I want you to remember the letters of their entries. So, for example, Child A, then you have B. I'm on Child F now, so you got to keep up. Um, we're going to finish up Child A today. One of the reasons that I want you to keep up is because later on in different blogs, like I'm actually on blog 21 this Friday, 21, believe it or not. And I'm actually going to bring Child A up again for blog 21. So if you start with 21, you really won't understand who Child A is. And you'll be thinking, well, something's wrong with her because she's talking about some kid named Child A. But if you've been keeping up from the beginning, then you'll automatically know which kid I'm talking about and which experiences I had with Child A. So make sure you keep up. I am on YouTube. These live videos are now going on to YouTube. Now, I thought that I could actually do live streaming on YouTube. YouTube changed their requirements. You have to have about 1,000 followers on YouTube in order to post live. And I am nowhere near that yet. So when you have the opportunity and you feel the need, please go ahead and subscribe to my YouTube channel for me just to help me out. You can find that at Dr. Lisa. I also posted a link to it on all my social media pages. So if you could do that for me, we can stop streaming on Facebook and Instagram and we can go straight to YouTube. Okay. All righty. Let's focus on the ending of the type of therapeutic relationship that I had with Child A. And then I'm going to answer a really popular question that I'm getting. And I want to say hi to my mom and to my aunt Diane and my mom Gwen. They're both watching me on Facebook. So thank you for doing that. So I wanted to acknowledge them. All right. This is the last series, Blog 6. Don't go into the building. I think you understand now why this kid warned me not to go into building 3. So if you're not keeping up, you don't know what building 3 is. Building 3 is a building that will come up multiple times in my writings. So, okay, I'll give you the YouTube channel again. Okay. I'll give you I'll talk about that building 3 multiple times. So keep up with me. There are 4 of them. 4 is going to be important around Halloween. So make sure you keep up with these. All right. So when it comes to Child A, I understand that this is a child who only spoke to dark spirits. So, what the kids call dark angels. So, this kid knew of other white angels, what he would call white angels, or um, angels. Now, some of them are not God's angels. Remember, dark angels can be tricky. They can be manipulative. They can also change form. So some of them can appear to the children as white. In later blogs, I get to that. I'm going to talk about that some more because I haven't touched upon that yet too much. But not all white angels are of God. And that's the difference. So trying to get this particular child to distinguish between dark angels, which are demons, okay? White angels that are demons, angels that glow white that are of God was pretty tricky because this was a kid who really enjoyed the ability to see ghosts and that the dark ones befriended this child, which is why it became a little scary for me too, because I don't personally want these kids entertaining demons, but some of them just did, and this is one. So what happened toward the end was I had the opportunity to learn quite a bit from this little one about what was seen by this kid at my job. Around the different buildings and in the parking lot and, in between each building, behind one, in between buildings 2 and 3, there was statues, like abstract art, and there was grass and then the parking lot. So in this little grassy area is where not just child a couple of the kids told me about some things that they would see, within between buildings 2 and 3 and within that grassy area. So this kid was one of them who could just see almost everything. And not all kids did that. Not all of them saw everything, but this one did. But the focus was never, remember how I said how the majority of the kids would tell me different things around me, different angels and whatnot. This was not a kid who focused on things that were deemed godly by me. This was a kid who spent a lot of time entertaining demons, okay? Going to bed. They talk to me. They hide. When my parents come, they go into the closet. They go under the bed. When they leave, they come back out and they talk to me. We're friends. They go to school with me. So trying to separate this little kid from these demons or these dark angels. Remember, kids call them dark angels, but they are demons, okay? Separating this kid who really enjoyed befriending these dark angels was really challenging. It was so challenging that this is how it ended. We talked a lot about these demons. And one day we were sitting in my office and I asked this kid, well, how do you talk to them? Because I had seen kids that can see ghosts for so long, I never really thought about until I met this one. Well, how do you talk to them? Tell me exactly what you're doing. How does this work? Do they talk to you? And the answer was yes. Yes. They talk to me. I talk to them. As you heard last week, this kid talked to them directly in front of me, through the window, through the doors of the door in my office. Remember, they weren't allowed in my office because I had already prayed for protection and prayed that these demons would not enter my office. So they weren't allowed in my office and they didn't come. So this kid I have a window to my left, which is why I'm pointing. And the window of my office was to my left, to my left if I was facing the back wall. So this kid would always go over to the window and talk to them because remember, they weren't allowed in my office. And so I would sit there and watch. So I said, which I also talked to child B about, but we'll get to that next week. How do you talk to these things? How do you talk to them? I can't see them. So what are you doing? Are you just like saying hello, or how are you playing with something that no one else can see? Well, it was explained to me, and it's been explained to me a million gazillion times by these wonderful children. They just have conversations. They just have conversations with them. They talk to them, they play with them, they interact with them. And if you think about it, if you are um, imagining all of this in your head, I want you to imagine these little kids in front of me just talking to stuff, and they can hear them. So do you understand now why some would think that these kids are delusional or hallucinating? If you've ever seen someone maybe in a psychosis or in a state of severe, symptoms of mental health, sometimes you'll see they'll be listening to something talking to them, or they'll talk back. This is why there's such a divide between, for me, was this really a mental health challenge, or do these kids really have the ability to see ghosts? This one, at the time, I felt had the ability. Why? Because there was a persistent and a consistent description of what was around me. So I earlier in the podcast and in the blogs, I talked about the angel that stood behind me, which I'm actually going to talk more about her in upcoming blogs. He saw her. There was no tree by the window, but when we would go outside, this kid would see what I call the angel in the tree. So these kids didn't know one another. They had no idea about one another. And remember, it's all confidential. I keep repeating that. It's all confidential. So whenever I did take on a new kid client and they start talking about, for example, the angel that stands behind me, ding, 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 ding. You understand? So at some point, putting it all together and saying, hey, there's something to this, it made sense. So I asked if I can talk to them. And child A said, yeah, just talk. They can hear you. And I'm like, really? Okay. Why are you here? Those were the kinds of questions I asked, and they would answer. They would answer through child A, not through me, because I couldn't hear. So, you have to rely on these little bitty kids to tell you, what these entities are saying. Now, that can go one of two ways, right? They can either tell me the truth about what they're saying, or they can lie because they're little babies. At least I call them babies. This one was about 8 or maybe 9 or 10, a little bit older. But it was all with the dark angels, it was always the same, that they wanted to harm the kids. Yep. If you read the blog and you get to the blog where I can't remember which one it is right now, because remember, I'm all the way on 21 and you guys might just be on blog 6. There's one blog where I talk about a demon that has a red and black face. That's what I'm talking about. Okay. That's all I'm going to tell you about that blog. You have to read it. So that's what I'm talking about. So it was always, eventually they wanted to harm children. That was the end. And in my mind, I can never understand someone that harms children at all in life, but I definitely can't understand it from an entity. So I started asking a lot of questions, and a lot of you that are listening know me personally. So if you know me personally, then you know I'm going to be me. So why would you want to do that? I mean, even in the spirit realm, I mean, why don't you just go to God? Those are the kinds of questions that I had. And so that is how I learned, when you encounter a kid who can do this, another way to prove to yourself that they can actually do this is to hear what they have to say if you ask questions, because, for example, I knew that a lot of the kids called these children, I mean, these demons, dark angels. Other kids didn't know that I knew that. So one of the questions that I would always ask is, hey, what do you actually know about me? And sometimes these kids would tell me personal things, and they would kind of do this. If you can see me, look at me. I'm going to show you what they do. And if you can't see me, I'm going to try to describe it. So the kids would, if you ever been around someone who is either hard of hearing or hearing impaired, you always look at the interpreter. I'm sorry, you always look at that person, not the interpreter. Okay. So the kids would kind of train me not to look at them, but to have a full conversation with something that I couldn't see, which was so weird to me. Think about that. It was just so freaking weird. Anyway, and the kids would interpret what was being said. So I would ask things such as, through the kids, why are you here? I'm just going to give you an example. And sometimes they would say, we don't want this kid to see you. So we're going to stay outside. And the kid, for example, this happened with child A. And as far as I can recall, that was a huge issue. Because what would happen is these kids are under our care when they're with us. It's just like school teachers or physicians. They take care of us when we're with them, but we have to go home. And sometimes majority of the time, not sometimes, kids have to go home back to their environments. So back to these things that you're helping them, get through. They're going back home, and guess what's happening? They're talking to these dark angels at home. There's nothing I can do about it when they go home, right? But there are some parents who are so excited about this that they start having these kids feed into it. For example, asking them, hey, can you talk to my grandmother? Or can you talk to my deceased father? And these demons are like, oh, heck yeah, we can talk to him. And so the kids are like, yeah, it's grandma, it's grandma, it's grandma. Now listen, I can't see ghosts or anything. So I don't know if when individuals pass away, if God allows them to come back and say hello. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But what I can speak to, what I can say without a shadow of a doubt, that some of these kids were talking to demons. Now, I fought through this with this child, tooth and nail. And we had some very good conversations. I can just tell you, and this is actually not in the blog, but it might be in the book, so I won't give you a whole lot of detail about it. We were outside once, and these entities were following this kid almost as if you can picture in your head a little kid and a bunch of other little kids behind them, kind of walking. This is the kid and just kind of walking like this behind them, like they're protecting this kid from me. So if you had to guess what happened with child A, this kid did not continue therapy. This kid decided, based upon what these demons were telling this kid, that this kid was not coming back to therapy with me. So I'll just give you a breakdown of that. The mother called me one afternoon and was really upset, and basically told me that child A felt as if there was no need for therapy any longer, which kind of surprised me, because if you listen to the podcast for the past 2 weeks, I mentioned that they originally came to me for psychological testing, and I worked with them on that and thought I would never see him again. And then they actually found me. Remember, I said that they found me, and then we started therapy because the parents were hiding this ability from me. But from the things they said to me, I started wondering if this child had a delusional disorder or something more serious, remember? So to call me, and we had, I think it was several weeks. It may have been 12, 13 weeks that I had talked to and worked with this family. So to abruptly end the therapeutic relationship was pretty shocking to me. And so what happened was these dark angels kept telling this kid, you don't need her. We don't want you to see her. We don't like her. We don't want you don't need therapy from her at night when this kid was going to bed. So imagine putting a little kid to bed, and when they're in their rooms by themselves, this is when this little one was talking to these things. So this is when they were telling this kid that. How do I know? Because I asked the parent to come in to do a termination meeting, therapy, because I wanted to know um, I wanted to hear from this kid what was happening and why this kid wanted to terminate therapy. And I remember that day. I remember that day as if it was yesterday. And this kid said to me, because my friends told me that we don't need to see you. We don't need to see you. We are fine. And I talked to the mother and I said, are you sure you want to do this? I mean, I would really like to continue. I really feel like, we can get through the therapeutic part of, the relationship on top of this kid being able to see ghosts. And the mother mentioned, I'll go ahead and let child A make the decision. And that's a challenge in and of itself. This kid was too young to make that kind of decision, in my opinion. The mother wanted to celebrate these skills, which was fine. But what she failed to understand is that what was happening to this kid was dark. So in the end, I never saw this kid again. And that's always so sad to me. But I had to sit back and think about what I learned from this situation. And therapeutically, sometimes clients just leave you, Sometimes they're influenced by other things, and there's nothing we can do about it. In this case, there was no influence whatsoever by anything that I can pinpoint, except that this child was talking to demons. And a lot of people ask me questions about demons. Listen, I'm going to repeat this a million times to all of you. Is the spiritual realm real? Yes. Do you befriend demons? Nope. If you can see me live, the answer is no. Don't do that. I've seen so many tragedies with children and people who are doing things like playing with Ouija boards and things like that. So the answer is no. That's one question that I get almost every day. Should I play with a Ouija board? What happens if, how can I, here's another one. Oh, here's a good one. How do I summon demons? Hell, I don't know. I don't summon them. I know too much now about it. Don't you summon them either. Yes, somebody just said on Podbean, yes, and the parents or someone invited these entities in. Absolutely. Absolutely. And let me talk about that for a minute. I've known of parents, and I'm going to do a whole segment on parents coming up with another professional in a couple of weeks. We're going to pair up. I've known parents, Michael, he's commenting, who actually play with Ouija boards with their kids, but also Oh, you got to go all the way up in the blogs. I think it's blog 19, 20. I talk about something like that too. And so sometimes they are invited in, absolutely. And you don't know how to get rid of them. And that's the problem. Some people don't know how to get rid of them when they invite them in, and they don't leave. They don't leave. It is you're right, Ray. It's very complicated. They don't leave unless you demand them to go, which is another question I get. One of the things I used to teach the kids is something very simple. You have to demand them to go away in God's name. You just do. Even if you don't believe in God, you just do. That's how you get rid of them. And that's where I was working up to with child A, but it was taking a lot of time. And it was taking so much time because this child loved talking to them. And I write Katrina, and I don't even know why, you know, because this is probably of all of them I'm going to talk about, because I can literally go from A to Z and start over again, because I kept all the notes. This is probably the one kid who has zero desire, zero, to get themselves away from these dark angels. None. So when I lost this baby, I felt the loss because there was nothing I could do about it. Nothing. So I felt like I had lost, like it was score demon, Dr. Lisa, 0. Okay. So the mother fed into it, and that's all that, I could do. Okay. So, child A, however, I'm going to tell you something else that happened when I was with this kid. That just blew me away. So let's talk about that, because I talked about building 2. I talked about building 3. Let's talk about 4. Okay. The subject today is at the top. Don't go into the building, from blog 6. This is the ending of the therapeutic relationship with child A, including how do I speak to them. So we talked about this already. Now let's talk about something else child A did in building 4. This is going to set you up for Halloween. Building 4 is where we housed in St. Louis, where we housed the administrative offices. And I talked about it last week with the staff. The staff knowing that there was an entity in the building, a dark one, and they named him. Remember, I talked about that? Okay, so this gets this is going to set you up. In building 4, on the outside of the building, child A and I walked around this building 4. And child A pointed out, every door has a crucifix on it. And I was like, really? Wait a minute. Now I always have to tell you, with child A, I was pregnant because my pregnancy at the time was a very important point. Yes, Catholic, and we're getting to that, honey. Had the crucifixes on every single door. And this kid said, there are crucifixes not only on this building, but look at buildings 1, 2, and 3. And we did. Every single door had a crucifix on it. I'm like, you should see my face, guys. I'm like, what the heck is going on? Now, this is my job, right? And so again, I go to everything that these kids told me. I would go research. I'm no dummy. Yeah. Somebody put WTF, so I'm laughing. So I'm like calling the staff again, because remember I had called them before, because this was the kid that told me about some stuff that was going on in the building. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm like, why do we have these crucifixes? So I'm calling the staff like, hey, okay, so I called you guys last week and asked you if you knew there was a ghost in the building, because these babies are telling me that there's a ghost in the building and that it hates me. And they're like, oh yeah, pacifying. Yeah, there's a ghost in here. Yeah, his name is so and so, and he's upstairs. And my former boss told me, yeah, that's why I moved out of the building, because there's a presence in there, and so I couldn't take it. So I had to leave. So you already know that part. Okay. So now we're getting into the part that kind of freaked me out. So the staff's like, oh yeah, we keep those on the doors. And I'm like, okay, why are these on the doors? I get it, I do, but what's going on? And they're like, oh, yeah, we keep them on the doors to protect us from demons and the ghosts and whatnot. And I'm like, what does that mean? So my kids are right. So you see, in my mind, as a little Dr. Lisa, I'm like, what the heck is going on here? Okay, so here's your clue about what happened on Halloween. What I'm going to tell you on Halloween. And this actually, here's the funny thing. This information actually came to me around Halloween. Not around Halloween, but it was cold outside. I remember it's always cold around in the Midwest around October. And so I was very curious about this, because they were telling me that it's for all the kids. No, he's right there in the door and he hates you. Woo, he hates you. And I'm like, what does he hate me for? And they're like, he's a demon. You talk to angels then. I'm like, you doggone right. And I'm getting ready to talk to him now. Keep that thing away from me. Yeah. So listen to my blog from last week. Yeah. So they said, yeah, there are Catholic priests that live next door. And I'm like, good. So I give you a hint. These are the Catholic priests that were involved in something that became a major movie, guys. So, yeah, TBA on that one. So when I tell you these things, these are not lies. Man, this stuff is true. So those Catholic priests played a major role in St. Louis and also in a movie that came out years ago. So I'll let you guess on that one. And I'll tell you more about that as we get closer to Halloween. So, yeah. So this kid was the first one to discuss those sightings with me at my job. And it really had me thinking a lot about what was going on at my job. And I started getting a little anxious about it, because this was not something I learned how to do. This was not in my clinical program. Because you actually don't learn anything about anything biblical, and I wasn't strong biblically back then, and so I didn't understand a lot about what was happening. So let's just be real for a minute. All I knew is that these were ghosts, and I was like, how? I used to ask other professionals, like, what do you do? What? And one told me, we don't judge them. And I said, well, I'm not judging anybody. I just don't know what to do to help them. People call them crazy. People are going to start telling me I'm crazy. And I hate the word crazy. However, that's how society describes these lovely individuals. And I don't like that. And I didn't back then, because it's not hard to distinguish this from mental health if you understand mental health. Okay. And I understand it. So it was easy for me to look at these kids and assess them and sometimes give them psychological tests and establish working relationships with them and know if this was just something that was harming them or interfering with their activities of daily living. And I kid you not, more times than not, it was not interfering with these babies' activities of daily living. They were going to school, they were living their lives. It's just when they looked up, they're like, oh, I don't know what to do because all I see are ghosts. I want you to imagine that because that's how it feels. You know, you and I will get spooked out at a haunted house, right? We get spooked out at a haunted house. These babies see this stuff all the time. I can tell you, kids wake up in the middle of the night. There's a bed next to me too. I'm in my basement. If you see me pointing, it's because there's stuff reminding me of stories just in my house. There's a bed I remember, and I think it was child C, and I didn't talk about this, who said sometimes if I get up at night, there's a female ghost right in front of my bed, kind of like, hello, here I am. And she's frightened by this stuff. There are some people who ask me, how can I see ghosts? I don't know. But I tell you this, every kid that I've encountered would tell you, you don't want to do that. You don't want to do that because it's scary. So there are some parents who explain to me that many of us have the veil lifted when we're little kids, but society over time will give us that blind eye or put that veil back. But for some people, the veil stays gone and they can always see ghosts. And it can be scary because they see dark angels. They see, I remember a little boy told me he was watching, what was that movie? Nightmare on Elm Street. And this little kid told me that I remember like it was yesterday. Sometimes when I'm talking, I'll start remembering stuff and I'll tell you when that happens, like now. One day he was watching Nightmare on Elm Street and he looked next to the TV and there was a ghost that appeared just like Freddy Krueger. And it scared him so badly that he ran screaming and crying and opened his eyes with his mother and saw it again. These are the kind of stories that I would hear from kids all the time. So these kids are scared and they don't know what to do. Child A was different because this kid was not scared. This kid was not in the least bit frightened. And thank you, Kristen. And this kid was definitely determined to keep these things within his life. And that can be done, but it's how you do it. Okay. And this one felt as if, he could control it. So that is what happened with child A. And if you have any questions about child A, make sure you go to the blog or just ask me. I want to answer a couple of questions that came up live. Thank you guys. I love that. Have I ever seen a ghost? No. But I am going to talk about, because remember, I can't see ghosts. Okay. I don't want to see them. As a matter of fact, honestly, like to be very, very honest, when I'm dealing with all this stuff and I kind of knew a kid could see ghosts last year, which started me to do the blog and the talk on the podcast. But when I'm dealing, like I don't do therapy any longer, but when I'm working with kids in schools and doing testing, if I do come across one, I'm so serious that I start praying about it and protecting myself because that's what I learned to do over 20 years. And so probably because I protect myself and I'm very guarded over my family spiritually now that I've been dealing with all this. That could be why I don't see things, but I don't know. However, yeah, you can call in. Go ahead. However, somebody's gonna call in. This is the first time this happened. That's cool though. Hey, Michael.
Hang on, I got to get my headset on.
Okay. I'll finish your question in 1 second. Thank you for calling in. What do you have to say to us? He's putting his
Oh,
headphones
I
on.
didn't want to I didn't want to
It's
interrupt you, but
fine.
I wanted to just tell a true story that happened with our neighbor over here and my son's friend that was playing around with a Ouija board and what happened to them over there.
Oh my
And
God, tell us. You have a lot of people listening to you. Go ahead. You
uh,
guys call in like Michael. I don't care. I love that. What
yeah, I have
happened?
my own. Anyways, well, the neighbor over here, he was playing with for a little while, and he was the first couple times he went over there, and he came back and told me, and he, my son knows that Ouija boards are a no-no here at the house because I've kind of, generally explained to him what they're about. So he came home and
Mhm.
he's like, "Hey, Dad, she's playing with a Ouija board." I'm like, "Well, does her dad know?" "Yeah," and he lets her. Yes. Well, I'll make a long story short. I said, "Well, you're not allowed to play with it," and I had called the father and warned him. I said, you guys need to put that thing away. And he's not, if he's
Mhm.
going to come over there, you're not allowed to have it out. She's not allowed to play. Your daughter's not allowed to play with it while he's present. I don't want him around that. And I tried to explain to him nicely. I said, "You know what you're playing with when you're messing with those, right? It's not just some board game that you're playing with." Yeah, but we believe in God. And I'm thinking to myself, that doesn't mean anything.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
make a long story short, there was one other incident. She wasn't playing with the Ouija board, but he went down in the basement. She had another friend over, and he went down. This is sometime after the story that I just said.
Mhm.
And he went down into the basement because she had a pool table down there. And he asked, "Hey, can I go down there?" And she was upstairs playing with her friend. And she's like, "Yeah, go ahead. You can play on the pool table." So he went down there, and he came home. I mean, just flush white in the face. I'm like, what's going on? And he's like, "I was just over there." I'm not saying people's names here.
No,
I
keep
was
it
just over
confidential.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he goes, "I heard this whisper, Lance." My son's name's Lance. Lance. And he goes, "What do you want? Leave me alone," or whatever. And then he just ran out of there.
Mhm.
So that happened. And then shortly after that, her father lost hearing in both ears. He's younger than me. I'm 53 and he's like 48, and he lost hearing in both ears. He had some weird medical condition that happened in his just some freaky medical condition that happened in his ear, lost hearing in both ears.
Oh my God, I'm so sorry.
Now, I'm not saying that it's related, but I think it is because I have heard.
Mhm.
I'm speculating that it is because I have heard incidences like that.
Yeah.
Things like that can happen. So I just wanted to share that story, and anyone out there that wants to mess around with Ouija boards, it's not real. And if you're going to do it, you got to know what you're doing. You always have to say goodbye, and there's a little rules here and there. Otherwise, what you were talking about can happen, and things can
Oh yeah.
manifest it. And the
Oh
stronger
yeah.
they get, the harder they are to get out of the house. And
Yeah.
so,
I'm so sorry. I'm so glad you called in. I really appreciate it. Stay on if you want.
sure, I'll stay on and listen.
Yeah, stay on if you want. Let's have a conversation about it. I actually know a lot of stories, s- unfortunately, Michael, similar to that. I've had some, you know, some people tell me, adults in particular, that demons can make you sick. Remember, I don't know if you
Yes,
heard one of my podcast guys, all of you, but I talked about when I went into building 3 and we were going up the steps, and one of the child A talked to me about, how that staircase was smoky. Remember when I said I walked into the building, I felt heavy, and I have asthma and it's lied dormant for many, many years. And I remember it wasn't just a pregnant, how pregnant women kind of go, oh, it's just too much. It wasn't that. It was a really heavy feeling on my lungs, and I think it felt like it was an asthma attack. So I believe individuals when they tell me, that these dark entities can cause, sickness and depression, and
absolutely.
yeah, and other mental health ailments. What do you think about that part?
Uh, yes, 100%. I've had an
Mhm.
experience with it.
You have you
Yes,
comfortable
100%.
you
Well,
comfortable talking about it?
yeah, I can talk about it. And we were in an apartment, and this was about, I don't know, well, my son's 14. So it was about 12 or 13 years ago. We lived in an apartment. He was just an infant. And I was indulging in some drugs.
Mm-hmm.
I had stupid. And I really think that when you indulge in any kind of chemical dependency, you're left vulnerable to these kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was feeling really depressed that particular day. And my better half of 16 years, who I'm still with today, which I'm very thankful for,
Amen. Mm-hmm.
she was doing dishes, and we were in a very small apartment. I'm like, oh, I'm going to lay down on the couch. She's like, what's wrong? I go, I feel very dreadful and very just really depressed. Well, what are you depressed about? I don't know. So it was this dreadful feeling. It was so strong that I just, out of nowhere, I just yelled out. Like you were talking before, casting them
Mm-hmm.
out with Christ. And
Mm-hmm.
I've had background in Christianity and things like that. And I just belched out, in the name of Jesus Christ, leave me alone. And you heard
Amen.
this, and you heard this, "Ah!" Like something was leaving me and screeching. She immediately turns her head and looks at me, and I go, "Did you hear that?" And she says, "Yes." And I go, "Oh my gosh!" And then I immediately felt better after that. So that's a true story as well.
Oh my God. I've seen that before. I've
Oh, there,
seen that. I believe you. I want you to know
it's real.
I completely believe you. I've seen that. Oh my God. I've seen I've even had kids talk to me about that feeling of um dread and these demons talking to them, and then when I would teach them, which I have not talked about yet, how I taught them how to rid themselves of dark angels, how relieved they felt once I taught them to do that. And then they weren't on medication or anything, and they weren't in therapy anymore. It was amazing to me. And when I would teach them how to pray, because I didn't have a choice, I had to find a way to help these kids. And when I would teach them how to pray and we would do it together, and they would see the difference in the room. So they would tell me that God sent his angels to protect me, and you would see their eyes light up, and they would just look around the room and they would smile and they would feel safe, which was a total shift in their mental health before they would come and see me. And these are the things that I would have to teach them to do to go back home as well, because even if the parents didn't believe that this was a way to help them, they couldn't deny the difference in their kids once they started to pray these things away. So I completely hear you. I have not ever heard, you know, a demon leaving, but I've seen a difference in a room. How about that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you think about it biblically, Christ does say that you have the power under me. You have the power. Now, if you think about it, if you go in a room and a room is dark and you turn on the light, what happens to darkness?
Mm, it goes away.
Exactly.
Mm,
So there
mm,
you go.
mm,
And that's
mm.
how you get a demon out
Wha-
through Christ.
And, what would you say to others who, Michael, I get all kinds of questions about demons. If I showed you my email and some of my social media pages, you would be completely at a loss as to how many people ask me about demons. They want to summon demons. And in my brain, maybe because I know too much now, I kind of just shake my head going, I don't want you guys to do this. But what would you say? What kind of advice would you give to people that want to conjure up demons?
Well, first I would advise against it, like you,
Yeah.
and and secondly, I really don't think they know what they're really getting themselves into, and I think
Hmm.
it's kind of a curiosity type of thing
Hmm.
they're kind of dwelling into, or what am I saying, playing with.
Hmm.
So all you can do is advise them not to do it, because it's they just don't know what's entailed. It's kind of like, when you're telling a 2-year old child, hey, stay out of the street, don't play in the street, and you have to reinforce it, because that 2-year old doesn't really understand the dangers of the street until he or she gets to a mature level where they understand, hey, I could get hit by a car. It's kind of the same concept. It's very
Absolutely.
dangerous.
Yes, it is. Hey guys, I hate to interrupt this conversation, but my mom just texted me and asked me to rush her to the emergency room. So I'm not sure what's going on. But
Okay.
unfortunately, hey, you call back next Wednesday at 5 o'clock. I would love to talk to you again. And I apologize, guys, but I don't know what's happening to my mom. So let me um, hang up and thank
All
you
right.
guys for joining me. Um, I'm all confused now. Michael, I'm sorry.
Oh no, that's okay. I get it. No, if you got to go, go. That's
I
more
don't know what's
important.
going on with her, guys, but let
Well,
me
let's
go
hope
check.
hope everything's good. I hope everything turns out for you.
Thank you
That's
so
not
much. Me too. I will definitely be back on next week. Okay.
okay. Sounds good. Take
Okay.
care.
Thank you guys. Bye bye.
All right. Bye bye.